Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's discussion will focus on the 25th commemoration year of the genocide against the Tutsi, with a specific focus on the role of youth and the preservation of memory. Now, official figures state that 60% of Rwanda's current population includes people who are born after the tragic events of 1994. What we'll be discussing on tonight's panel is how to ensure that fewer generations carry forward this mantle of preserving memory of the genocide and making sure that it never happens again. My name is Dana Mpisi. I am the host of The Square, and I'm joined here by our guests for tonight. I will start on my extreme right. We have with us Geraldine Umutesi. Geraldine is the Deputy Director General at Imbuto Foundation. Very, very happy to have you with us, Geraldine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're also joined by Ephraim Ramwenje, who's the resident panelist of The Square. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Dee. How are you?
Good. And on my left, we are joined by Louis-Antoine Muhire, who is the CEO of Rwanda Cooperation Initiative. Louis-Antoine, very happy to have you.
Thanks for having me.
I hope I pronounced your name right. Louis-Antoine or Louis-Antoine?
Well, actually, I prefer my Rwandan name,
Muhire.
Muhire.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So we'll stick to Muhire on the show.
Thank you.
As well on the show, we have our resident panelist, Berna Namata. Berna, always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Dana.
We are also usually joined by Charles Haba, but unfortunately he couldn't be with us. So we are here to discuss how young people can carry forward the memorial culture we have when it comes to ensuring that we preserve the memory of the genocide against the Tutsi and make sure it doesn't happen again. And my first question is to you, Geraldine, and you, Muhire, and it's to do with the role of youth. And technically speaking, in the next 1 or 2 decades, it will be up to young people, post-genocide generation Rwanda, as well as young people born during and after the genocide against the Tutsi. It will be up to them to carry forward the mantle on preserving the memory of the genocide to ensure it doesn't happen again. But what we've been seeing, and I know we had this discussion last year in April as well, during Kwibuka25, and what's been happening as there's been a decentralization of commemorative events that now happen across the country. And what authorities have been informing people is that there's very low participation of young people in these commemorative events. And we want to ensure that Rwandan youth own this narrative of the genocide. So there's a decline in youth participation when it comes to events like this. At the same time, the onus is on young people to carry forward memorialization of the genocide. So Geraldine, I'll start with you. How do you think, what can we do to ensure that there's a better ownership or a bigger ownership of youth from now?
Thank you, Diana. First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to take part of this platform. I think that all of us are part of that next generation. Mm-hmm. And we maybe to answer your question, we have to put that into a context. Who are the next or the aftermath generation? We have different categories of young people. We have young people who survived genocide and who were like maybe aged 5 to 10. So these young people understand and they experience the genocide. I think people of my age and maybe yours have been really, they lived genocide and they understand that they have to preserve memory because they really know what it was. We have other category of youth who are born from parents who participated in genocide, in committing genocide. And we have other generations that are born after 1994. But they were born either from survivors or from perpetrators too. I'm going to share a short story of mine. Before genocide, my parents have been deported to Bugesera region from north. So every time I was asking my mother and my father, asking, why are we here? Where is my grandmother and everything? But they couldn't really tell me what happened. And you know, in rural areas around Christmas, there is really many maize growing. And you know how Rwandans, we like eating maize.
Yes.
And grilled maize. Around the Christmas, we used to grill maize, and I remember my grandmother was always against that, because when you grill the maize, it's always pom pom pom, like people are just coming to kill you. So
that's the sound it makes. Yes.
The sound it makes was really very traumatizing to our grandmother and to our parents. So they always tell us, don't do that. And I was not aware that this is really hurting. So this is the same situation we are living today. We have a generation that is really in totally confusion. They see you going to Kwibuka events, but they don't know why you're going there. Those who participated in genocide, they are not able to tell their children or their young people that they participated in genocide. If they go to Kwibuka commemoration, they will hear what their parents did. And sometimes adults are going without telling young people that this is what happens. So we have also another category of young people who have curiosity to learn about what happened. These are young people you will see everywhere trying to organize different initiatives without even the government involvement. So these are young people who are trying to understand why and what it is. So genocide, I think there's a researcher who said that there's no words that can explain what genocide can do to a nation. Because you're living in a total confusion, you're living in a total fear, and that trauma you have when you lived in genocide, you don't want your children to also live the same situation. So that's why sometimes you know how parents are protecting their children. So I think part of it is that. But what we can do is to also, if we are a generation of 25 years, no one is still really very young. So the young people have really to take responsibility, to take a step and organize and understand and read, because we are really exposed to different facilities and opportunities rather than our parents. Our parents were not really in that world we are, in that country that is promoting, that is giving the opportunity to everyone. So for me, I think even if we are in different categories, we have to take a step. And sometimes we don't blame the other generation. They have done whatever they were supposed to do. Some of them gave us a country, some participated in genocide, others survived. But what the young generation has to do is to take that legacy with us.
I just want you to, just before I go to you, Muhire, I want, when you say there's a lot of confusion, and I really appreciate on behalf of the panel the way you broke down, the way you contextualized and broke down the different categories of youth. You have genocide survivors, you have children who, you know, their parents or their elders were perpetrators. You have youth who are didn't go through the genocide per se, but a post-even genocide generation. So there's a whole mix, and I really appreciate that contextualization, because it gives to whoever, you know, is in charge or whoever is leading a good framework on how to address the issue. But when you said confusion, can you expound more on it? This is based on your observation. It's, yeah.
Okay. Maybe the confusion I'm talking about is that sometimes young people think that these kind of programs are for adults. It's not only for Kwibuka and so forth, but most of the events that are happening in our district and so forth, you need to be more creative and more innovative and engage them. So if you're not engaging them, they're just there. But the confusion I was talking about is that it's not easy to talk about genocide. It's not easy for the parents to open up. I'm going to give you an example. If, for example, I have 2 children now, if they ask me, where is our grandmother, what happened, they always used to say that, Mom, are you going to genocide? So you see, they know the word genocide, but they can't relate that. But the young people who are, for example, by our policy, they are 15 to 30. So these are young people who were 5 years during the genocide and others were born after the genocide. So if you are under 5, whatever you experienced, there's always a confusion. Why this happened? Who did it? Why? And what can I do? And those who were born after the genocide, you see your parents going to commemoration, you see what is aired on TV, but no one is able to tell you the truth. And as usual, because they are exposed to different opportunities and facilities, they go on internet, they can find different narratives, and they get confused. Who did what and why? So I think when you are in that age sometimes, and you realize that there is that confusion psychologically, there are some who are taking a step, and there are others who are preferring to say, you know what, I don't want to be connected to that history. This is for adults. And others are saying, no, I have to go and find out what it is. So this is the kind of confusion I was talking about.
Thank you. Muhire, would you like to weigh in on this, on the question on what do you think we can do better, from your personal perspective, on how youth can drive forward the narrative of preserving memory?
Sure, but allow me to pick some element from the intervention, starting by the fact there are these 2 realities in Rwanda. Either you have a background of a survivor, or you're coming from a family like me, with a lot of people participating in the genocide, and close people, parents, uncles, and aunties. Now, but also take the fact you mentioned, we here on the panel, somehow we lived or were born when the genocide happened. So we have some experience of anyhow. And for me, that makes us a bridge to this new generation of the people who were born way after the genocide, let's say 2000 and up. And the question now becomes, when we ask why aren't they that involved into this journey, to me it's a matter, as you mentioned, Geraldine, well, to explain things in their own way of understanding. Because as you know, after a certain generation, there's a new perspective, there's a new way of seeing the world that they may not understand how come someone were killed because they were Tutsis or they were called whatever things they were called. So for me, now it's our work. It falls on us here on the panel to be that bridge, but that genuine bridge, to be, as she was mentioning, for instance, when you come from a family where there's a lot of genocide there, it's not easy. It's not an easy journey where you have to, realize that your parents or your uncles, your auntie killed people or financed somehow. And people who used to take as role model all of a sudden become evil. And but the other side also, you see there are some families, for example, they survived and they're only kid left. So they have no role models, no way to see. And on that one, allow me to say we are lucky to have had a leadership that was able to set up forums and initiatives that makes me and Geraldine not enemies, but Rwandans. Because I always tell people, don't worry necessarily that the content is not there. The content is there. Otherwise, me and Geraldine will be at war. If the content that made us genuine citizen of the new Rwanda, and you know her, she's always busy. She has maybe 14 hours journey. Same as me. I'm a commissioner in Unity Reconciliation. I'm a CEO at RCI, and I'm in Panama, Africa. I'm into many stuff. And here we are with two totally different, or let's say opposing backgrounds, that if you were to take them in normal context, we will be fighting. Me trying to justify the unjustifiable, and maybe her also try to say, I'm going to revenge my mind. But how come today we both spend more than 14 hours a day building this country? So the content that made us go through, go toward, or aim toward a great goal is there. Now, how can we, the question is, how can we make sure this new generation, .com and whatsoever you call them, can also understand what we did well, what made us now a great citizen of this country. So today, as she mentioned, they can, in their own innovative way, be involved. Perhaps me and Geraldine, we have enjoyed to go at Itorero in Gando because we value too much the RPA soldiers who liberate this country. But maybe someone who were born too much in a period that was so peaceful, he may not enjoy going to Gabiro and stay for 10 days. But perhaps he wants something online, something, I don't know, Ingando online, Itorero online. And to me, I have this philosophy of saying it's not because they are not reading as much book as we used to read that they are not smart. Actually, they're digesting more information than we used to have at their age.
Absolutely.
When I was 15, probably I will read one book a month or 2 months. But today, the content that a 15-year-old is digesting per day maybe is what I had to go through for 2 years. So it's a matter of now, the content we know is there, is tangible. Otherwise, me and Geraldine will be fighting. It's clear. But if you are working for the country tirelessly, not even being paid for that, toward the same goal, how can we make sure this content that worked for me and Geraldine
works
for the other generation? That's the question for me. And I think now we have just to be innovative, engage with them, talk a lot with them, listen to them, not just marginalizing, say, oh, you guys, you don't follow the elders and whatsoever. So that's my perspective. And the good news, again, is the content is there. Yeah, and it's working.
I like that both of you talked about innovation in terms of engaging with younger people. I think how our generations before us are still engaging with them is different. And that's why I really like to reiterate what you said, Muhire, that we are actually the bridge between our predecessors and the younger generation than us. Brenna, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just feel like we are at that point, which I would call a turning point, where young people don't have a choice but to accept the responsibility that this is our history and we have to do something. Because the tendency with us young people is to feel that it is somebody else's problem. It's not my problem. So they deal with it. But I think the more we try to foster awareness and responsibility among the youth to appreciate history and feel the responsibility to do something to preserve it, I think we'll make a lot of progress. Now, that is very difficult because already, like we're seeing, like she mentioned, rightly mentioned, most young people feel that going to commemoration events is for old people, you know, probably because we've seen now there are lots of panels. Now to sit for 2 hours for a young person, concentration levels are a problem.
Yes.
So how, going forward, we find a way of packaging our history in a way that young people will still be able to relate to it, I think will be and will remain a challenge. But there's already work going on. Tomorrow, I think, no, Friday.
Friday.
Yes, on Friday we have Mashirika with the G25 presentation, which I'm looking forward to, which is entirely young people. And even from the commemoration, we saw young people really take center stage. But I think it has to move beyond that and even be incorporated in the education system. Because as young people, we spend more time at school, and you don't want to catch them when they're old, you know, they're much older. So we have to find a way of getting young people in schools, and if possible, I think make it a condition that schools have a calendar of, you know, their pupils visiting memorial sites, and to sort of have them at least think and have a feel of this history beyond EPO, because after 100 days, then for most young people, I mean,
life, of the year continues.
Yes,
exactly.
the rest of the year continues, and I think that's why the biggest challenge is.
And we'll come to the education part in the next half of the show, Ephraim.
I think for me, I just want to talk on what Berna said about education, but I think for me, I'm saying this now as a young person who was very young when the genocide against the Tutsi happened in '94. One big challenge, I think, happens when young people look at all of this, like everything else that quote unquote is for their parents, is that they do not see how that affects them. And you know, when you look at Rwanda's history, even when you look at where it is today, and even the conversations we continue to have about unity and nation building, you realize that what happened in 1994, the tragedies of 1994, form an integral part of who we are as Rwandans today. But unfortunately, that does not get communicated to the young people in a manner that they understand that it's part of their life. So for them, it's something that, because I genuinely, when you look at the older generation that experienced genocide in a conscious manner, they saw it happen, or to a certain degree were affected by it in a conscious way. You find that they do not have, they understand why it's so important to preserve the memory. They understand why it's so important to remember. But when you get to young people who don't seem to understand that, that's where you find these gaps. And I think coming back to, there are many avenues that can be done, and you gave a really good example by using the school infrastructure, but I think the education infrastructure, but I think at the heart of it is showing young people why it's important to have this as a part of your life, and why why you are where you are in relation to this. Once young people start to understand that, and I say this on my side, when I started to understand this, it made it significantly easier to get involved and to empathize. I think, and that's where I would say the heart of it lies.
In empathy.
And it goes beyond empathy. It goes beyond, it has to show, young people have to see the value of it in their lives, you know. And I think that's where, from it, that's where the empathy will grow.
Yes, Geraldine.
For bringing that point, because as you said that there's that kind of people who are not going to the commemoration activities, but memory is beyond events.
Absolutely.
Memory is very deeper than just a one day or April activities or July activities. So how can we make understandable, how can we make very clear to young people to understand what memory is? I'm going to give you an example of what because in addition to being at Imbuto Foundation, I was also a member of GIRG and IRG. This is the Genocide Survivors Association, students and graduates. So to make sure that we are preserving that memory, we organize ourselves into what we call a family, so that we can keep, you can't preserve a memory if you don't have a transfer of what you know to your next generation. So that family, because we couldn't find our own family, we created a family setup where we transmit to everyone what happened, where we share what happened. So, and today, the reason why I'm bringing this example is that you have to think memory, preserving memory beyond a one-day event, or 2 days event, or 100 days event. How can you make it like your lifestyle? Because if you, even in our culture, they say, in our language, they say, a family that is not remember perish, and is really completely perished. So how do we make that memory as our lifestyle? And this will help us in our day-to-day life. If I'm going to do something that is really very bad to the community, I have to remember that this country has a cost, that this country lost over 1 million of people and others who were killed, rescuing those who were killed. So it's a matter of being innovative and make that memory our lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I can
yes,
add.
Please.
I think, again, in the sense of what she mentioned, and allow me to share what RCI, for example, we are doing, and I think somehow it contributes on certain level into that journey of making this memory our lifestyle. For example, at RCI, we are scanning all the public institutions, looking for what can be qualified as homegrown solutions. And those homegrown solutions are the one who helped Rwanda to heal easily when everybody was running away. And the best example is Gacaca, for instance.
Yes, yes.
And you'll be surprised that how many now Westerners universities that want to have it in sort of didactic material about Gacaca. What's the principle behind that? Because, for example, in Chicago, they are fighting each other between white and black. So I think we have up to 1,000 of them, small, and some are major, Girinka, Umuganda, but others are small. And by having those well-written books that can be not only into our public libraries, but also available for any other person who wants to read it, somehow, every time you read a book about Gacaca, you have to understand the context. If you read about Girinka, you have to understand the context. If you read about Muganda, you have to understand the context. We had no money, but yet we needed a city that was clean. So I think we have to go faster because the generation is coming faster.
Yes.
But I think such initiative of documenting what is to be run done, what we've done so we can get here, somehow, in my view, will help to share the ownership of our memory, because you cannot talk about those homegrown initiatives without, of course, talking about our history. That's the one I think. But again, I come back to what we mentioned in terms of being innovative. If you see on social media, there's some very, very young people, 18, even under, that actually are leading the conversation on what happenings. Of course, we'd like to have a much larger younger generation getting involved actively onto that. But again, I think, how do we help those who are already engaging actively to maybe help us to understand the other that are not understanding what's happening? I don't know if you understand, there's too much understanding.
Yes.
Like we know some leader on Twitter.
Yes. An influencer.
Influencer,
as they
exactly, they call them.
Yes.
You see, I'm already out of the game. So influencer, how can we as the bridge, because
Yes.
we lived the memory, myself, for example, when I see what some kids in Belgium who are defending their parents on some gruesome crime they've done, I feel so bad. I'm like, how can I explain them? So first of all, what your dad did is his business. Secondly, recognizing the genocide against the Tutsi doesn't make you a bad person. In contrary, it gives you back the humanity that your parents took away through whatever they've done. Now, one of the best things I've done, I try to find always this gray person who's like, I'm not sure. Then I engage with him in the background. And I was from Canada mostly than Europe, and there are many people who really changed their view on Rwanda because I slowly engage with those influencers, and all of a sudden when they see the reality, they actually also start influencing others. So they either mute them by sharing their realities or actually help them to come and discover their country. So I think we have to help those leaders, those influencers, to help us understand. So that content that is available, again, because it's real. It's real.
It's evident. It's on the ground. Yes.
We can't have a so beautiful country today if we're not reconciled. To me, it's a fact, and I think we have to go fast. Yeah.
We have to move quickly.
Absolutely.
Yes, Brenna.
Just in relation to what he's saying, I feel that we have to also be aware of the digital gap because most of the time now, people keep talking about social media, and most of the time they're talking about Twitter. And you would imagine that everybody in Rwanda is on Twitter, which is not true.
A very tiny population.
A very tiny population is actually on Twitter.
Yes.
And most of the time, it is your friend, it's someone you know. So it's more like people are talking to themselves. So I think as we try to find ways of reaching out to the youth, we must deliberately target outside social media.
Absolutely.
And beyond Twitter. Beyond Twitter, because if you look at our mobile penetration, people have more mobile phones that can use WhatsApp. But I'm not sure about Twitter. So I think as the reason I'm mentioning this is every time almost people are talking about Twitter, and I just feel like it's being overrated in the sense that within the Rwandan context, there are very few Rwandans on Twitter. So if you have a message, either you have to use WhatsApp or you have to physically find a way of communicating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to add to that.
Yes,
There's around even innovation. There is something that recently was started by some young ladies. They started a podcast.
Yes.
And it has
Actually,
been...
I was listening to it today before I came here.
Exactly.
It's what's it called? Breaking the Silences?
Yeah,
It's
Breaking the Silences. So they started this podcast some time back, and it has really been successful in the sense that they've garnered a lot of listenership, if that's even a word.
Listenership. Yeah, it is. Yes.
But they had a recent podcast, and this is now coming back to the role that young people can play, because these are very young ladies. I think, if I'm not wrong, Nikki we've had on the show. I think Nikki was an infant at the time of the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994.
You remember Dominique?
Dominique, Nikki, yeah. So she
Keep it professional.
Yeah, I'll try. so she had a young genocide survivor called Nelson. He works with
Aegis.
he works with Aegis. And he shared his story, and I think he's on Twitter and he's considered somebody known on Twitter. But how many people, and everybody knows a bit of his background, but how many people know his story? And these are fellow young people who said, let's use our platform to actually spread this message. And again, the message gets sent through WhatsApp, because I got the link through WhatsApp. And I think she said she listened to it on her way here. I know that many young people who probably didn't get a chance to go to any commemorative event, but got a chance to listen in. And I think once we give young people that opportunity to say, okay, what can you do to actually, this is the challenge we have, and we have to spread this message so that it again, our history becomes part of our life. what can you do? You'd be surprised what young people can come up with.
Absolutely. And I also like the fact that, you know, we came in asking you, Muhire and Geraldine, and also to the rest of the panelists, what can young people do? But I like how you turned it back. And what I'm getting is, yeah, they can do a lot, but the onus is also on what can we do?
Absolutely.
The generation that's kind of in between,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
What can we do to bridge what our predecessors and older generations have told us, what we are actively involved in, what we understand easily, and ensuring that there's a transference of information to young people. I'd like to go to the next part of the conversation, which is to do with genocide, ideology, and education. And I'll start with you, Geraldine. So, and it's like you said, the perpetrators are there, they're getting old, but they're spreading genocide ideology to young people, especially in diaspora. And it's worse because they're spreading this ideology to them, and on top of that, they're not even in the country to witness, you know, the realities on the ground. So it's like a sort of a double sword. And what I want to tie this genocide ideology with is to do with post-genocide Rwanda in terms of education. So we know that in the curricula, in the national curricula, there are elements of genocide education, you know, in terms of ideology, in terms of its denial, but there still continues to be incidences of genocide ideology cases, especially in secondary schools. And today I was reading on Twitter something that happened in a secondary school in Musanze. I don't know if it's been verified, but it was something to do with an element of genocide ideology. Some young girl was being taunted, but again, that stands to be fact-checked and corrected. But my question to you, Geraldine and Muhire, is what do you think our education system is doing in terms of combating this? Are they doing enough, or more needs to be done?
Thank you so much, Diana. When we are talking about education system, we have to look at the formal education and informal education. So for the formal education, we are very glad that we have a leadership that is promoting a curriculum that is really inclusive, and we have genocide studies in our curriculum. But we have it as a cross-cutting issue, and I have a friend of mine who is always saying that if there are subjects that are really very difficult to talk in school, we have genocide and we have sexual reproductive health. So I'm sorry to say so during commemoration,
that's true. Yes,
but
yes,
it's true.
It's true.
Because it has, the two subjects have its reality, and you can imagine that even if it is included in our curriculum, but it has to be taught by people who went through the genocide, either survivors, as Muhire mentioned, either perpetrators or born from families who committed genocide. So when you're concerned, especially in a classroom, when you're concerned with something, it's not easy to transfer. It's not easy to transfer knowledge or to be very creative in a way that you can really make that transmission of knowledge.
And connects with your students.
Yes. So sometimes you say, okay, so this is what, you know, you don't use the methodologies you're using for example, teaching biology and so forth. So this is part of the formal education. Yes, we have it in our curriculum, but I like the way this time we have like Kigali Genocide Memorial Center that is really empowering the teachers to know how they do it. But we need more of informal platforms. I will give you an example of what we are doing at Imbuto Foundation through our youth forum. Whatever you are doing, you have to engage young people, you have to educate them, you have to empower them. So you have to come up with a creative way of breaking that silence. I remember when we had a forum called Nduminyarwanda, and what does it mean to be a Rwandan today? That was a topic of one of our forums. We had many young people who have been able to open up, to talk about what they think to be a Rwandan today means for them. And that was like a beginning of also talking about what they think about genocide and everything. So like the civil society organizations, like other NGOs, like the young people, or the organizations of the young people, they have also to help our education, our formal education, to boost the education system. It's not only the formal and the curriculum, but how do we go with what the young people are creating now? For example, if you take the example of Peace and Love Proclaimers initiative that initiated the Walk to Remember, if you take Never Again, that is initiating the safe space for young people, if you take ARG and JIRG, who are really initiating Hobera Ubuzima, that is the initiative of talking about genocide, but to other fellow genocide survivors. How do they do that? If you take also an example of JIRG, where we are organizing Uruhongore, that is an education platform for kids who are born from us. So we are transmitting that knowledge to them. So we need really to not thinking about the formal education, but how can we also think about the informal education, how the civil society organizations can help the government to also boost our education system to talk about these issues.
And I like you mentioned, I like that you mentioned all these initiatives by young people. I mean, right now, young people, I think, have taken the lead in the last 25 years as well. You know, JIRG, IRG, Peace and Love Proclaimers. I mean, the Walk to Remember is one of the biggest youth-led events that happens during 7th April. Yes, Muhire?
Yeah, I think now I'm going to switch my hat from CEO to Commissioner from National Unity Reconciliation Commission.
Yes.
And share some what is being done today to adapt this way of teaching new young people the way forward. For example, I know they have this, I think on Wednesday, on Fridays, all public schools have this mandatory moment where they learn how to be critical on any topics. And most of the time, they touch unity and reconciliation, and of course, genocide against the Tutsis, 94, and other kind of topics that really relate to our history. But we realize, as a commissioner, it wasn't enough. Kids sometimes, or teachers sometimes will skip it for the reason she just mentioned, because either they are still really very, I mean, the wounds are still fresh, or otherwise they are so ashamed. They have ifunwe, like they're ashamed of, I am from, nobody can go and brag around and say, I'm from a family with genocide. So now the Unity Reconciliation Commission is working on a platform, electronic platform, that could be open to the public. Of course, when I say public, institutions such as Imbuto Foundation and the other you just mentioned, to feed the content that could be pushed to that moment where they have to discuss about topics. For example, the great example you gave of how you gave an open space to the young people to explain or to express what they feel as Ndumu Nyarwanda, rather than a teacher saying, okay, today we're going to talk about Ndumu Nyarwanda and we have 45 minutes. So I think it has to be a joint effort from many initiatives such as Imbuto Foundation or other you mentioned. And I know as a commissioner, and actually I'm the one leading the making of the platform. You know I like technology.
Of course.
And we want really to connect with all those partners, NLG, IRG, and others, to feed us from what they've noticed on the field, so we can now quickly spread the word to the teachers and say, okay, I think maybe given to this experience from Imbuto Foundation, you should also touch this topic. But again, I think we have also to understand things are moving much faster than the means of the government and the leadership. And that's why, again, we shouldn't just say Imbuto, RJ, but you, me, and you, what do we do on a daily basis? When we meet young people, we meet all of them often, we go to teach for business or others. What do we do to make sure they really own this journey? Do we just wait until they go to school? Do we wait until they get in touch with the Mbuto Foundation? Myself, I constantly teach. Even in a business I lead, I always tell them, relate whatever we do to our history. I tell them, for example, today we are lucky to have a system where you can get a job without asking who's your father, who's where you come from, what kind of ethnics you belong to. So this young generation, I have some very young people in my new office now, RCI, 22, 21. They look at, really, people they used to, you need a passport so you can cross district. They're like, really? I'm like, yes, definitely. If you're not born into the right district, you couldn't get a job neither, because if you look to the history, you will see Ruhengeri had all the directors and ministers, and maybe Gisenyi and the rest of the country did not exist. So those, on a daily basis, when we are having a coffee at RCI, I just drop that. And quickly, it pushed them to go and search. Is it Muhire, is he really joking? Is it exaggerating his role of commissioner? And recently one came back to me and say, hey, that was our fault. I mean, you were born on the wrong time. I'm like, yeah. So now take advantage of what you have today to make a better Rwanda. So you have really to help the government also to, we have to play that bridge role in a more dynamic way. Don't just wait after Mbuto Foundation or Commission of Unity Reconciliation, but you on a daily basis engage with the young. And I know we all have experience here. Maybe not he was very young.
But he still engages with younger.
Within, from what has been told to me.
He's getting
what I've
there.
Learned, I can share that with the people
Talks
around.
with old people like me often.
Do you feel you're getting there?
No, I think, Frank, I think there's nothing like getting there. I think this is one of those continuous journeys that you will always be. One thing that really helped me, and I wanted to allude to it, coming back to the power of social media. Kwibuka has an account, and every day from the 7th all the way into July, they share. Every day they share things that happen. They report, literally they go back in time and they report. And every year there's a fresh, so there's nothing like ever knowing the story. There's always something new to learn. And I think for me, that was a start, and there have always been experiences after that. And sure enough, whatever I learn, I try to share with the people around me.
I just wanted to raise also the issue, you know, in Germany after the Holocaust by the Nazis against the Jews. I mean, Germany is one of the countries whereby the education system is so strong. We're teaching its young people ever since, you know, the Second World War on what really happened, you know, and very direct and systematic. Who did this, why they did it, why it was wrong. And it's something that's inculcated in their curricula until even today in 2019. And I just thought that's something worth, you know, bringing up, because the way they did it, I know it's what we're trying to do. It's only been quarter of a century in Rwanda, but I think we need to be a bit more deliberate, especially like you said, informally and formally as well. We're going to give closing remarks to our guests, but Brenna, I think there's something.
No, I just wanted to say that in addition to unity and reconciliation, we need to add tolerance, teaching young people to be more tolerant of, you know, differences and take time to understand why someone is different and just respect it. Because part of the history has taught us that a culture of intolerance, you know, can really break the society.
It's what led to
the genocide. Yes. So I think it has to, we have to find ways of helping young people to understand the culture of tolerance. And this manifests in different ways, even today. Social media, you can really see it, that someone does not take time to understand anything. They will just rush to, you know, take a side or, but trying to get young people to feel that they have to do the hard work, which is to find information and understand and try to respect the difference, because you cannot always expect that someone will be the same or you will have the same opinion. I think the culture of tolerance among the youth has to really...
And also just to add to that very quickly, I think, you know, we're here discussing in terms of perspective how young people, you know, what can they do? Or we're discussing manners in which they can actually grab the reins and continue this journey forward. But I think for these young people and for ourselves, I think it starts with also the mindset, you know, when in our homes, in the privacy of our homes, there's something that we all know what parents communicate to children.
Absolutely.
This transference of their particular memory, in most cases, it's what perpetuates the continuous systematic divide between Rwandans. Behind closed doors, I think we need to be deliberate in how we are talking to our children. Because, you know, to my kids, in the next 10 years until they're 15, I keep on telling them, I keep on preaching a system of division. It doesn't matter how many generations come forward. I think, you know, in terms of parents moving forward, we need to be very aware of the intimate and private conversations we have with these younger generations moving forward, because that's the reality. That's you know, that's what happens. Geraldine, if you can give us closing remarks.
So, for me, I think that the generation behind us have written their own history, which we inherited. So it is for us to write our own history. It is for us to take that stick that they gave to us to lead this country. So we will not be excused that and say that really our parents didn't say this, didn't explain to us. So there's no excuse. We have different information, source of information. We have different opportunities around. So there's no excuse. For me, I think it's a matter of being connected to this country. Whatever country can choose to have an education system that is so and so, but for us, it's really different, because those who committed genocide, we are still living with them. Those who survived genocide, they are still living with the perpetrators. So our children and grandchildren, we inherit what we experienced. So it's for us, for this generation, to really build a country that is they are owning. And also the history, we have to accept the consequences, and we deal with it.
Absolutely.
So I can't add more than on what she said, except saying, again, in other words, ownership is very important. We have to own this journey. As she mentioned, well, we have no excuses at all. And we should also be courageous as the one who liberated this country. They were even much younger than us today, and they sacrificed a lot. When people tell me, well, Muhire, of course, some of your family rejected you because you embraced the new Rwanda, the new being Rwandans. To me, how will I cry when I have Geraldine who lost all her family? So if it is a price to pay so I can be part of this new Rwanda, that is, I know clearly, because tangibly I can see it's the right way to go, then it's okay. So we have Geraldine who also have to live with perpetrators of people who killed her family. And she had to have this courage of, okay, they did bad, but what can we do? We cannot kill them, otherwise you become like them. So you understand this courage that we all have to have, and at the same time own this journey on a daily basis. Literally on a daily basis. And I think, again, as I mentioned, if me and Geraldine are not fighting today, I think the future is bright, because the forums through which we went through worked. So let's keep pushing as much as we can. Hopefully our kids will be much better.
Thank you very much, Muhire. Thank you very much, Geraldine. Very, very insightful, comments from you both. Thank you very much. Brenna, Ephraim, always a pleasure to have you guys on board. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please keep the conversation going using the hashtag #TheSquareRW. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Thank you very much and have a good evening.